Even a cursory knowledge of American history tells us the early 20th century was a turning point for women's rights. The right to vote was secured nationwide in 1920. University of San Diego historian Molly McLean points out women in the West came to the party earlier than that.
The territory of Wyoming gave women the right to vote in 1869, followed by Colorado, Idaho, Utah, California in 1911. But that wasn't the only thing that women wanted.
She says they wanted some recognition of their place in history and the contributions they had made.
And so part and parcel of that would be to get involved in the World's Fairs, to make sure that they had women's buildings of their own in which they could display women's work.
Molly McLean has written about the involvement of women in the 1915 Panama, California Exposition. She is also a ninth-generation San Diegan who can trace her ancestry back to Francisco Lopez, who accompanied Father Serra to what would become our fair city. McLean says the movement to guarantee female participation in the World's Fairs began in Chicago, which would be the site of the World Columbian Exposition of 1893. Women in Chicago lobbied Congress, which passed a remarkable piece of legislation.
A provision that required any World's Fair receiving federal funding to include women, in fact, specifically to include a board of lady managers.
Now, the influence of women on Balboa Park did not begin in 1915. In fact, back in the days when it was still called City Park, Kate Sessions opened a nursery there, which would become the foundation of her vision for an urban park that was beautifully landscaped and protected from private development. Nancy Carroll Carter with the Friends of Balboa Park said Sessions earned her nickname, Mother of Balboa Park.
She was such a strong advocate of the park throughout her entire life. She was always someone who was promoting the park, trying to help people understand why it was important to preserve the park. So she was just the park's #1 cheerleader.
But that didn't mean the men behind San Diego's 1915 exposition were inclined to welcome the contributions of women. San Diego did not receive federal funds and was therefore not subject to the congressional mandate. In part, the organizers of the Expo feared that if women were involved, they would try to ban the sale of alcohol. The women's movement at the time was closely linked with the temperance movement, but then some of the male resistance was just plain old chauvinism. One of the women lobbying the exposition later joked that the men imagined a women's board as a polite synonym for a squabble court, where the poor dears would meet, discuss, weep, and even fight with umbrellas as weapons, and then proceed to sulks and hysterics. What they got instead was a threat they could not ignore.
A group of San Diego women promised the exposition organizers that they would, if they didn't get involved, they would take that news to every women's club in the country, and essentially threatening a female boycott of San Diego's exposition in Balboa Park, which would, again, financially be very detrimental. And so the men caved.
On the sale of alcohol, the temperance movement also caved. Beer and wine were sold at San Diego's Panama, California Exposition. The expo had a woman's board housed in the California building, now the Museum of Man. Along with many social events, the Women's Board sponsored live concerts and a public nursery, which allowed many more women to attend the exposition. They also brought many events focused on politics and labor. A modern art exhibit organized by Alice Klauber would lead to the foundation of the San Diego Museum of Art in Balboa Park.
In 1915, San Diego was not just a cultural backwater. It had a group of women who were modern, far-thinking, activist women who believed that San Diego could be an incredible progressive community, and they wanted to showcase their achievements and achievements of the city to the world. And they would do that at the Panama, California Exposition here in Balboa Park.
Tom Fudge, KPBS News.